Hi everyone, it's Kelly here. Welcome back if you've been here before, and welcome if you are new. I love to have you either way, and I today am going to be wrapping up June. Now I'm quite aware that this is a well overdue video. For some reason I just never quite got around to recording my June wrap up. But here we are, we're here, we're recording it now. It's almost the end of July. Well, yeah, it's almost the end of July. So that's okay. We'll get into it. And I'm going to try and make this a really short wrap up today. I know I can waffle on sometimes, so I'm going to try not to do that as I talk about these books. June was a bit of an up and down month for me. Mostly the books that I read were amazing. But I also read a really awful book. And I've struggled to get to read very much this month at all because of this book that I didn't like at all. And yeah, so I finished the first book that I read like on the 1st of June. And then I picked up this other book, and then I didn't read anything at all for about 20 days because I just didn't want to pick up this other book. So my husband suggested to me that I find books that are going to be, books I really, really want to read and that are going to be really, help me get my head back in the game of reading. So I did that and read some amazing books. So I'm going to talk about all of these now. Let's go. The first book that I read this month and finished was Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This was one of the Women's Prize nominated books in the shortlist. Personally, loved this, gave it almost gave it 5 stars. I gave it 4.5 stars, but I probably would bump it up to a 5 now that it's been sort of like sitting with me for a bit longer. So I might have to remember to do that and bump this up to a 5. So I cried like a baby in this book. It was such a heart-wrenching book in some ways, just in terms of mental health and family support and or lack thereof. Family dynamics, all of those kind of things kind of came into it. And it really was heart-wrenching in that way. But it was also hilarious. So this was also a very funny book where I laughed out loud sometimes because of the amazing banter particularly between the two sisters, so Martha and her sister. But essentially this is a book about a woman who has a misdiagnosed mental health condition. You never actually find out what the mental health condition is. And in the notes it says it's not a particular one. It's like a composite of different symptoms and so on. So, don't try and work out which one it is because it doesn't exist. But in the book, she is misdiagnosed with a bunch of things. She's tried so many things, but she just has these constant not constant, but very regular bouts of depression, really debilitating depression. She ends up feeling suicidal. So that's definitely a trigger warning for this book, and is very depressed. So about halfway through the book, she gets an accurate diagnosis, and starts treatment basically for this condition that she has. And the treatment literally works straight away. Like it changes her life. And yeah, so she discovers some things around her family to do with this mental health condition. Also, her husband, Patrick, is a doctor, and she believes that he should have known. Like, how did you not know that I had this? Like, that you're a doctor, you should know. So it's, so she has some, some struggles as she's kind of coming to terms with this diagnosis and like how it has affected her life and how things could have been so different for her if she'd had the correct diagnosis when she was younger. So there's that sort of aspect of things too. I think though, by the end of the book, to me, the overarching theme was love and, all different kinds of love too. Loving a difficult person through a mental illness, family love in marriage, all of those kind of things. And this is a book that in some ways is about poor communication, which to me is usually a trope that I avoid because I generally hate it. But in this book, I think it actually, the poor communication seems real to me in this book. So often it kind of feels like a gimmick just to kind of move the plot along. But in this book, it didn't feel that way at all. It just felt like the real dynamics of relationships and different kinds of families and romantic relationships as well. Especially where, like, you know, people who have stuff going on and then like toxicity kind of sets in inadvertently. No one's deliberately kind of bringing that vibe to the table, but that is just how things kind of pan out. So yeah, that really does kind of turn that on its head for me, because generally, as I said, I completely avoid this type of trope. So I was really pleased to read about poor communication that actually felt like real poor communication. And also, as I said, I loved the banter between the two sisters, so Martha and Ingrid. I think the only thing that bothered me, and this would have been why I gave it 4.5 rather than 5 stars, was that things wrapped up a little too neatly for me. But all in all, I laughed, I cried, I loved the characters, even the flawed ones, the ones that were, you know, difficult or did things, that they all just felt really real to me. So well done, Meg Mason. This was such a good book, and I'm so, so glad that I read it. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, I then started another book, which I'll talk about in a moment, but I didn't really want to pick it up. So it took me a long time, but eventually I picked up a book that I have already read before, and I believe I've already talked about it on this channel, possibly. It's The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill, and this is a very short book. It's only about 60 pages, I believe, and it is the most wholesome thing. 60 pages, correct. It's the most wholesome thing that you will ever pick up. It's about these two girls. So this is the main character here, whose name I have forgotten. What is her name? Greta. So her name is Greta, and she is this lovely girl who's learning her mother's craft, which is sort of making things out of metal. So she's kind of a smith in that way. And then she comes across a tea dragon, and tea dragons are these little creatures here. Basically, in this world, that's where you get your tea. And it's not just drinking tea, but it also has, like, you know, feelings and memories attached to the different types of tea that are available from different tea dragons. And then she begins to learn how to take care of tea dragons, and it sort of evolves from there. It's so, so wholesome, and you absolutely should pick it up if you haven't before. Anyway, this really helped me get out of my reading funk. And I then read the second one, which I had not read before, which is called The Tea Dragon Festival, again by Kay O'Neill. So this is a prequel. They're calling it a companion story. There are some characters in the first one that are also in this one, but they're not the main characters of this story. This is our main character here. And she is the brother of one of the characters that's in the first one. So her name is Rin, and she meets this dragon. So this is not a tea dragon. This is a regular dragon, I guess, a different kind of dragon. And you can see on the front, she's got tea dragons there. So she lives sort of like up in the mountains, and basically it is, again, a really wholesome story about this character and the dragon, and sort of the relationship that they build, and sort of it's about community and caring for people and so on. So it's just so wholesome, so beautiful. You must read these. They both get 5 stars from me. They're amazing. So as you can see, I've already, like, at this point, had a great reading month. Then let's get on to the one that I didn't like so much. So this is a book which I do not have a copy of. Thank goodness I didn't pay money for it. I borrowed it from the library as an audiobook. I hated it. It's called The Airways by Jennifer Mills, and I read it as part of, so it was longlisted for the Miles Franklin Award, which is probably the most prestigious literary prize in Australia. And I literally could not tell you what this book was about. Like, there's literary fiction, and then there's whatever the heck this is. There were some descriptive passages that were really nice, I guess. But that's the most positive thing I can say about this book. So at the beginning of the book, we find out that somebody has been murdered. And when they die, it seems like their spirit kind of remains, or like is it a ghost? Is it, again, this is part of the reason I couldn't tell you what is the plot of this book is, because it was really confusing. So this spirit works out that it is able to enter the bodies of other people, not to take over, but for their consciousness, this consciousness to survive, I guess. There is also the narration. So there's kind of it's a dual narrator. So when one is told from this perspective of this spirit or ghost or whatever it is, germs. At one point I was wondering if it was COVID. It was, really, really confusing. And then also you have this narrative of a guy called Adam, who is a massive creep. And he watches people while they sleep because he's a creep. But he thinks he's a really great guy and a good person, that he's not doing anything wrong, and that the reactions of the people when they find out are over the top. So he ends up moving to Beijing from Sydney, and he goes on the train a lot, like a lot. That's a lot of this book is him deciding to go on a train and then going on a train. He gets sick, and he doesn't cope very well with being sick. And meanwhile, this murdered spirit is looking for Adam. So you spend the whole drawn-out reading experience waiting for this spirit to find Adam. And I just didn't care. Adam was a terrible character. He was a really bad person who thought he was amazing. I kind of cared obviously I care that somebody got murdered, but the way that it was written didn't make me want to care about it. I was so glad that the book was over when it was over, and then was able to move on with my life. So the Tea Dragon Society and the Tea Dragon Festival helped me to finish this terrible book. So at least I'm done with it. I should have just DNF'd it. I hated it. It was really bad. Do not recommend. So we've got the highs and we've got the lows. And then I read one more book in the month of June, and that is the book for my Reading Around the World book club that I'm a part of, and it's called The Patient Stone by Atiq Rahimi. This was a really interesting book. When we were talking about it in our book club, one of the things that we talked about was that it kind of felt like a play, like almost... the way that it was written felt like it included stage directions and how to kind of set things up, and also some of the talking felt very kind of theatrical. So it was a very interesting sort of style of writing. So essentially we begin this story. We've got a woman who is praying at the bedside of her husband, who is in a coma. He's got a bullet lodged in his neck. There is sort of this kind of ongoing sort of outside of these walls. There is conflict going on, and it could be set anywhere. It really, really could be set anywhere. That's in sort of a conflict type of zone. So obviously there was some quite heavy content in here. We've got a person in a coma. We've got potential war or conflict going on outside the walls. Basically everything takes place within one room. That's the other kind of theatrical aspect of it, I guess. And you absolutely could just put this on as a play. just with barely any adaptation, it could work as a play. So, you know, you're hearing these tanks and gunshots and screaming and you know, all of those kind of things that you would associate with conflict is kind of happening outside. And then you've got this woman who's praying. So it's the country is a Muslim country. They refer to the Quran and her prayers and Muslim prayers. That we've got a religious leader as well, kind of coming in and you know, inputting, I guess is the best way I could describe it. So yeah, some quite heavy stuff going on here, but it was well written and it kept my attention throughout. I don't think this is for the faint-hearted. There were some quite like violent moments that were described and some kind of hefty stuff went on. But I think if you can put up with those kind of things, it's worthwhile pushing through with this one. Just be aware that the ending is pretty full on. So that's my only warning there. But yeah, I did enjoy this one. Enjoy is probably the wrong word. I was very engaged with this story. And I ended up giving it. I ended up giving it 4 stars, because it was a really engaging book to read. So that was my June. I didn't get that much reading done in the scope of things because of this delay that I had with the book that I hated. But I was other than that book, this was a really great reading month in the sense of the quality of the other books that I read other than this one that I really didn't like. So I'm going to take that as a win. It was a good reading month all in all, because I read these 4 books that were really good and one that we'd rather not mention ever again. And now I probably won't have to mention it again because I've told you about it in my wrap up. So that's it for today. So thank you for listening. Hopefully I haven't waffled on too much about these books. I'd really recommend the Tea Dragon Society and Tea Dragon Festival. Sorrow and Bliss was amazing. If you haven't read it, you really should. And you know, this is not for everyone, I don't think, but I think it's definitely a worthwhile read if you can get your hands on it. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you on the next one.